So, whether or not you believe in the spiritual realm or in the unseen is not the issue over here. I often compare it to politics. Just because you're a person who doesn't go out to the poll and vote, you may not like watching the news or seeing what these politicians will get up to. Just because you decide to exclude yourself, maybe watch anime and decide that politics is not for you. Well, this doesn't stop the politicians from still going out there campaigning, winning elections or losing elections, lying to people, stealing from the community, and so forth. So, whether or not you're involved is not the point. The elections will still go on and people will still do what they have to do. So, it's the same thing with the spiritual realm and things of this nature. I often tell people, you may not believe in the devil, but the devil does believe in you. Same thing goes for God. You may not believe that there is a God, regardless of whatever religion we're talking about. There is a God. And just because you don't believe that He is there, it doesn't mean that He's not there. Now, life is spiritual. I often look at the world like this. Everything we can see and touch is obviously in the three-dimensional, and it's obviously in the physical realm. Now, everything that we do not see, that could be four-dimensional, five, six, and so on. Some people call these places realms. Some people call these places worlds. Some people call these places planes, spiritual planes, or even heavens for that matter. So basically, for anything to materialize in this world, it has to be done first in the metaphysical or in the spiritual realm. A good example would be like seeing the shadow of something before seeing the actual thing. It's almost like foreshadowing, like foretelling. Now, let's get to the point. I was chilling with a guy one day, this just popped up in my mind after work. And as the guy was having his drink, unwinding and so forth, I had already stopped drinking by that time. And we were speaking and we were talking, and the guy started telling me about his family and his family business and so forth. So his family lives next to a river, and the family business has always been fishing and so forth. His grandfather was a fisher, his father was a fisher, and he himself said once he had resigned from his corporate job, he would go back and do something with fishing, with fish, with the sea and whatnot. And everyone in his family were very good swimmers, So basically there was love for the ocean, love for the rivers. They were very aquatic-minded people. I don't know if that's a thing. But then another thing I noticed that he had in common with his father and his grandfather is that they were all heavy drinkers. He himself is a self-admitted alcoholic, and he's okay with it because he's a functioning alcoholic. All right, so now that's not the issue over here, but the issue is he told me a very morbid story about his grandfather. His grandfather who is now about 78 years old, I believe, or who was now his grandfather, who was 78 years old, I believe, he told me one day his grandfather finished about a fifth of whiskey. That's like a whole bottle of whiskey, and set out to the sea. Now, this was a very strong 78-year-old and who was a very good swimmer as well. But the story goes like this. So basically, the guy drank and went out to sea, and he swam, and he kept on swimming until he went out of sight. At that point, people were a bit worried, but they thought, what, he always does this, he gets drunk and he likes to go fishing and so forth. But this time around, Grandpa went and never returned. His body was not found. And that's basically how the old man died. So now this is years ago. His father as well is a very heavy drinker and who also does fishing and is quite reckless at sea from time to time. Judging from the stories that he was telling me. And he himself had done some, suspicious, reckless things as well on his vacations and so forth, like throwing family members off board as a prank and as a joke, and jumping back into the water to kind of rescue them and so forth whilst being drunk. So what he saw as something that was quite random, I saw a pattern. And there were two patterns and two strongholds in this family. One of them was alcoholism and addiction, or rather the spirit of addiction and alcoholism. And the other one had to do with the sea, with the water, marine spirit bondage. Now, this family was under bondage or is under bondage, and he doesn't even look at it that way. Life is spiritual, no matter how you try to slice the pie. Life is spiritual. You know, people always say that in order to succeed in this world, you need to lean in to your unfair advantages. For example, if you're born rich, some people might think, yeah, you're a Nepo baby and so forth and you're spoiled. But if you're able to leverage your parents' money, you could propel yourself into further success. Donald Trump and many other people, for example, Donald Trump started off his business and his ventures with a $3 million boost from his father. And now look at him today. He's one of the richest men in the world. So it's the same thing. If you're good looking, for example, use your good looks and your charms to get you further in life, but not to your own detriment. So same goes for the spiritual things in life. We see people successful in everyday life and we think nothing of it, but a lot of people do engage in spiritual matters. A lot of people do engage in certain ceremonies and rituals in order to get to where they are. Just because they look good on the outside and everything's clean, there isn't anything spooky, it doesn't mean that they haven't gotten their hands dirty or dug into some of these spiritual things. Now here you come being naive, thinking that life is just about what you see, waking up in the morning, going to work, coming back, listening to music, having a good time, partying. Well, you're in for a rude awakening. Life is spiritual and you are going to have to choose a side. In fact, I'll say choosing no side is already choosing a side, because there are only two sides: light and darkness, good and bad, evil and righteousness. By you not choosing righteousness, you are inadvertently choosing evil and darkness by being naive and not caring. It's the same thing with politics. You know, they say the world is a terrible place because good men do nothing. But you choosing not to fight against the system, choosing not to vote or have a say in your own community, you allow these people to do whatever they want to do, and then corruption runs rampant. So life will always be spiritual.